Welcome to an Aquarian experience. 3 days of peace and music. I'm going to be talking about using metrics to compel groovy behavior. So I want to talk about what's beneficial about metrics. I want you thinking about being able to use your metrics to compel other people to have the right sort of behavior. In order to do that, you need to be able to have the right sort of messaging for the audience. I want you to understand and then tell your organization what your SOC does so that we can help them. And what are we going to help them do? We're going to help them to minimize damage. So first, just relax. Welcome. This is going to be a real trip. Let me introduce myself. My name is Chris Crowley, the author of the SOC class, SANS Senior Instructor. I've been writing the SOC survey for the last several years. You can download the latest version at SOC-survey.com. When I talk about security operations centers, I talk about them in the context of functions. What do we do in security operations? How do we function? We have a little bit of a steering committee where we interact with the people that we're helping. We have our command center, and that's where we look at what's going on. We keep track of what we're doing. We make sure that the people who are supposed to be working are working. We monitor to see if there are problems. There are bad people in the world, so we learn about the threats to our environment. If there is a problem that we have found through our monitoring or because somebody called up the command center and said, "Hey man, you got a problem?" we deal with it. We handle it. We got forensic analysis in order to do some deep, thorough, exhaustive forensic assessment of the assets in order to comprehend what happened. And we reflect and think about what we're doing, what the IT team's doing. We assess ourselves and we check and say, am I doing it well? Am I doing it as well as I could be doing it? And that's the approach that we take. And then we need to tell people what we're doing. We need to figure out who we're talking to in order to do that well. And so when I explain this to people, I explain in the context of the right sort of message for the right person. We've got metrics that we report to people. We also have some metrics that involve an objective, service level objective. This is what we got to do in order to make the people happy and keep things working. Some of our metrics, we just keep them to ourselves. We don't tell anybody. Sometimes we need to talk to people who don't usually think much about computers except for using them for their work. Those are users. We need to have the right message for the users. The way that I think about messaging the users is I want to understand what they need. They don't care about the way that the computers work, to be honest with you. You know what they need? They need a forecast. They need some guidance on what's going to happen today and tomorrow in order to be able to do the right thing today and tomorrow. I mean, think about it like a weather forecast. You know, it's going to be cold tomorrow. You need a winter jacket. It's going to rain tomorrow. You need an umbrella. You, the people developing messaging for your users, should be developing messaging based in data that is tailored to the needs of your normal user. Think about it in the most simplistic terms. Does this person need an umbrella or a winter jacket or what? And tell them. Don't make it complicated. Make it simple. Use the staff inside of your SOC, like the people who understand threat intelligence and the people who have been looking at the problems that are going on, people who are monitoring for those problems, and the people who are checking to see how the IT systems are set up and running, have them develop guidance that gets sent to users. So what you might be reporting out in the form of metrics are forecasts to your users, which basically say, here's what we've seen. This is what you need to know about it. And to be honest, the best way to change those users' behaviors and make them more resistant to attackers getting something over on them is to make it their own benefit. Speak to them about their personal use of computers so that they can actually use their personal computers more effectively, and then they'll bring that goodness back to your environment. You want to warn them about the things that are targeting the corporate environment. And I know working for the man's a drag, but we all do. We also need to think about the marketplace, figure out what our competitors are doing and how they might be trying to get something over on us, and then warn our staff about that. So this is what we need. This is how I develop metrics, communication to send to users. I want to think about being able to make my users understand what the situation is, and I want to flip the idea of user awareness training on its head, because really what user awareness training is about, in my opinion, is the SOC knowing that there are users out there that need to be helped. Because we have a tendency in security operations to forget about that. We're here to help them, right? They're not a problem. They're the people that we're helping. Now, they might not always do things the way that we want them to do, but we should figure out why they do things to be able to ease them into doing things better. So we might do some forecasting for them, but then we also need to tell our SOC staff about the people who are out there doing the things that make it so that the business can afford to have a security operations center, really. I mean, that's important. I think the idea of building out use cases and hunting in order to encourage that understanding the users is actually a good approach. I have a couple of different specific hunts that I encourage people in the SOC to do. And you can find out all sorts of details on me talking about hunting in other contexts. But the idea here is we should hunt in open source information to see if there's information out there about our organization's IT systems. That's what attackers are doing. We should do it too. We also frequently in the SOC have a problem of understanding who's responsible for the systems that we're defending. We should be working on that regularly to resolve that issue. I turn that into a hunt. Go find it. If it's a problem, resolve it. And so I want people to understand really, in the SOC, I want people to understand really, deeply, and truly, how computer systems work and how they communicate with one another and how we store data on the devices themselves. But really at the end of it, it's all about the people and the business and how we're actually working things. And they need to be spending time getting better understanding for their jobs in the SOC to understand how they can actually make a difference for the people that they're protecting. A way to get them thinking about that regularly is to give them a guiding principle. Focus on the center. This is what's really important. So we usually express this in terms of metrics, but I want something more cerebral. I want something more transcendental. How do we define success? Yeah, we got all sorts of numbers and statistics and details, but really, if there's one thing that I can ingrain into somebody's brain that they can keep going back to, how do we define success? We succeed by minimizing the damage from the threats that are out there to our environment. And I ask people when I talk to them about their security centers, do you have a statement of success? Can anybody who works in that SOC rattle that off the top of their brain, no matter how messed up they are? Sorry, I know they wouldn't be messed up at work, at least not these days, but So, the SOC is successful when it intervenes in an adversary's efforts to impact the availability, confidentiality, and integrity of an organization's information assets. It does this by proactively making systems more resilient to impact and reactively detecting, containing, and eliminating adversary capability. Now that sounds great. It's ambitious, but it's what we want. If you don't have a statement of success, that's a good one to start from. Steal it. I ask you to make sure that you have a statement of success for your staff, to have comprehension so that they know what they're doing and why they're doing something. I also want it to be a good one. Just having a statement of success that isn't aligned with your business, you can improve that. Also make sure that the SOC and the people in it believe in this statement of success. Now, that's a hard thing to do sometimes, to convince people that what they're doing is meaningful and relevant and has value that goes beyond their individual concerns. So sometimes we need to do some work in order to make sure that people absorb this and really see what we do. And finally, I want to make sure that your SOC's statement of success is approved of and accepted by and really supported by the organization which is funding your security operations. Because if you don't have that kind of alignment, you're going to have some problems. So let's just focus on the people in the SOC for the moment. We give them this general concept, transcendental notion for them to strive for. But at the same time, we're going to have some detailed metrics that are going to assess them on their performance. We're not going to assess them on their performance in order to make them feel bad about anything. We're going to assess them on their performance to compel them to be the best that they can possibly be. That's what we want here, right? We want peace and love and understanding and growth and the ability to come in, do a great job, go home, and be happy. And our metrics and our measurements and our service level objectives, they're all part of this. So I'm going to talk about these in turn. Let's start with some reported metrics, and I'll get back to the baseball card for our analysts. I got a whole bunch of these, but I'm only going to hit a couple of them in the time that I have. My favorite one, heck, I made this up, is the incident that we're looking at something which was avoidable. And I've got this scale. It's a real simple scale because I'm a real simple person. A 1, a 2, or a 3. You can't have a 1.483 here. You can have a 1 or a 2 or a 3. This is called discrete mathematics. It's an integer system. We don't have things in between 1 and 2. We have to make a judgment call. A 1, we don't like these, but they happen. And we're just going to be honest about them happening. A 1 is that there was something in the environment that we should have done, that we could have done, that we didn't do for no good reason. That's right. We just didn't do it. Maybe you forgot about it. Maybe you didn't want to do it. Whatever, man. Doesn't matter. You didn't do it. That counts as a 1. We have some 2s. Now 2s are like, you could have done it, you should have done it, but you decided not to do it. Why? Well, you had some good reason at the time. You had some real good reason at the time, really, and it seemed like the right thing to do at the time, but after the fact, man, wow, that was dumb. We shouldn't have done it that way, but we chose to do it that way, and it really was bad. Well, that happens sometimes too, right? Let's just count it and put it in the bucket. You're going to be upset about it for a little while. Move on. And what's a 3? Well, 3 is like that thing we call like a 0 day. 0 day. Nothing nobody could have done about it. Nobody knew. Nobody could have seen it coming. A lot of people want to claim that the problems that they had or 0 days, or threes, or whatever you want to call them. Usually it's not. But that's all right too. Sometimes we have threes. So I want you to think about this in the context of we can be real simple in our expression of what we think about the problems that we had. But we usually need to spend a lot of time and effort getting to the point that I could say 1, 2, or 3 and be able to defend that. And what I actually do with this is on a monthly or quarterly basis, whatever the agreed upon frequency is, I put out a report kind of like this. I show them, look, this team here, they had a couple type 1 incidents. They should have done something, they didn't. This other team, second business unit, they had a type 3 incident. We assessed it. That's what we think it was. We think it was a type 3 incident. That was a 0 day. Some real serious people breaking into that environment. They're bringing some stuff nobody's seen before to target business unit 2. And there was also some choices that business unit 2 made that kind of hurt them. They didn't want to spend the money. They didn't think they needed it. The system couldn't be updated. Whatever, man. That's the way it goes, right? But now I'm counting this stuff, and I'm keeping track. It's a real simple scale everybody can understand. Type 1, well, business unit 3 had a lot of them. Type 2, well, business unit 3 had some of those too. They got some problems over there. They're working on them. Now, if I can get people to understand what I'm talking about in terms of these type 1, type 2, type 3, in many ways it simplifies my expression to the rest of the organization about what sorts of problems we had. And hold on, because I'm going to take this and do something really wild with it. But you got to wait for it. It's coming up in a bit. So let's first talk about some service level objectives. Now, nobody wants to be judged. Nobody wants to be held accountable for getting exactly the right number of things within a certain amount of time. But if you're running a security operations center, you need to operate. You need to operate effectively, right? And so we want to have service level objectives. Now, a service level objective is just a metric, something that we measure, combined with an expectation that our customers or constituents have for us. Real simple. We actually kind of talk about this. Sometimes we call them service level agreements. Usually service level agreements associated with some sort of a service provider, and there's penalty for not meeting the objective. Service level objective, there's no penalty, but we have an expectation from our constituents or customers to do things within a certain amount of time or at a certain level of proficiency. So some examples of service level objectives, the idea would be I need to tell them from within the SOC when we have a problem that we think is going on their systems. So I'll tell them, here's the objective. We will notify you within 60 minutes of our initial verification that there was some damage to your systems. 1 hour. That's my service level objective for initial notification to you. And I tell them, you got to understand that if I've only been spending about 30, 40 minutes on understanding what this impact is, it's not going to be complete. It's not going to be exact. But I promise you, this is my service level objective and my agreement to you. I'll give you that initial heads up. So we can tell them about all sorts of things in terms of objectives for timing, for delivery of information, right? These are our service level objectives with our constituents. We also have a whole bunch of metrics about our internal performance and how many logs we collected on any given day. Honestly, don't tell anybody about those things. It doesn't matter. It's not relevant. We had 4,323,864 packets logged by the internet-facing firewall today. Who cares? What does that matter? You need to track that too, but it's an internal metric. It doesn't have relevance to people because it doesn't have meaning. If you can't tie something to a forecast or some sort of a tangible impact value, don't report it. It just confuses people. If you are going to report those sorts of data-centric elements, because you have to, also provide moving averages or representations that make that meaningful, relevant to a period of time. Now, I promised you I'd tell you about this. I don't really like sports, honestly, at least not watching them. I do a lot of them, but I don't like tracking baseball metrics or anything like that. This person's batting average doesn't matter to me. But honestly, we need something for our SOC analysts to be able to track their performance. My good friend Carson Zimmerman, he gave this presentation a couple years ago on metrics, and his presentation included this baseball card. And honestly, I just stole it. I took his thing exactly. He's got some great ideas in here. And after I heard his initial talk on metrics, I said, Carson, you and I should do a talk together on metrics. And we actually did. We wrote it for the first, and Carson gave it a couple of years ago in the UK. So you can find the video and the PDF for that. Last thing I want to talk about is something called impact. I know of very few organizations who are able to quantify consistently the impact to cybersecurity incidents. People don't do this well. So I'm going to give you a way to do it. Then I'm going to tie it back to that thing I was talking about in terms of type 1, type 2, type 3 security incidents. So first of all, in terms of understanding impact, everybody always talks about low, moderate, and high. The easy way that I deal with low, moderate, high is I say the lowest low is a 1, the highest high is a 10. And then I can actually define low, moderate, and high on different types of incidents or systems. I also like this terminology that I've taken from the US CERT. It's this idea of functional, informational, and recoverable impact, because there are different types of impacts. System might be down, or the data might have been stolen or encrypted, and we don't have the key to get it back. And so we have a chart that I advocate people working, which will be done for systems in the organization. And so the idea here is that you have a list of systems, right? So you just put them in big buckets and you say, okay, let's get an understanding of how important is this system to the organization. And on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being the lowest low and 10 being the highest high, if this particular system had a low, what is that relevant to the other systems that have a low? Is that the same? Is low the same for all systems? Okay, maybe it is. Maybe all lows in your environment are 3s. Or maybe you need a scale of 1 to 100 because you get real granular with stuff. Whatever, man. Whatever you need. But make it make sense. 1 to 10 is simple enough. And so 3, 5, and 9 are pretty good starting points. And then you got to talk with the people who run these different systems and say, what's the most important system? What's the least important system? Let's just understand it, because people in the SOC need to understand it to be able to tell you what's happening on your own IT systems. And so we just start with 3, 5, 9. It's easy. And then we adjust it based on our conversations with our constituents. Then what we're able to do is basically say, for this particular system, if it is really important to keep it up and running, well, then it has a higher value for functional. Same thing, 1 through 10 for functional, informational, and recoverable. And I talk to the people who run these systems about the importance of these systems. But you know what I usually do first is I go to their own risk register initially, and I use that in order to derive these values and present that to them so that they actually have to say, yeah, that's right, or no, that's wrong. So I end up with a chart that looks kind of like this. Now, these numbers are representative of the value of the system's functional performance, the information in it, and the likelihood that we could recover that system in a timely fashion to get it back online, and how important that actually is to keep that system up and running. Like, I don't know, you're running a pipeline or something that's delivering oil from one part of the country to another, and it's really important to be able to keep the oil flowing in that pipeline. Something like that, whatever. And so we would want to understand for this particular system or grouping of systems, what's the relative value for this system relative to the other systems in the organization for what we care about. And so then we can actually build these charts for each system. Because the people in the SOC, they don't know. They don't know what the most important systems are. We need a way to make that consistently expressive to the people in the SOC and the people who are the constituents who are being reported information from the SOC. And so what we do when we see a problem happen in those systems is we rate it low, moderate, and high, just like we always do. But now, low, moderate, and high, as expressed by the functional impact, the informational damage or breach of information, and the recoverability for that specific incident, we're at this point able to say, compared to other cybersecurity incidents on this system or other systems, we have a quantifiable value where we can actually draw the relative impact as defined for our organization's objectives. And that's kind of important to be able to report things like that. So I feel like that's real groovy to be able to do that. But I'm going to show you one more thing that I really like. The idea here is that when we have these sorts of damage things, we deal with problems and we address the risk. If you've heard of Alex Honnold, that guy knows how to deal with risk, right? So one of the things that we need to do is basically express to the people who are involved in these cybersecurity incidents what the damage was. So I can use that quantification of impact and bring it back to that report that I wanted to present to my constituents and say, hey, here's what was happening to the different business units. And I can show the impact of my different types of incidents in order to tell them, hey, you could have avoided this, and this caused you a whole lot of damage. I mean, look at business unit 3. And so now I have a quantifiable expression of the damage that was done through those people just forgetting or deciding not to do stuff when they really should have done it. And this allows me to compel some different behavior. Say, look, you really should be groovy. We want everyone to be groovy. So just trying to keep it brief here. Hopefully that was a good explanation of a couple simple and complex metrics which I use. So if you want to find me, I'm out there on the internet someplace. I cut my long hair and I got all corporate, but this is the way that things go when you grow up. Can't stay in Woodstock forever, I suppose. Maybe you can. Who knows?